Good afternoon, everybody. I would like to call to order the Cabarrus County Board of Commissioners for our work session for November the 4th, 2013. We have a nice big house today. Thank you all very much for being here. As a reminder, for those of you in attendance, if you have a mobile device, please put it on silent. This meeting is recorded and will be broadcast on our public access channel, so we would prefer that phones not go off during the meeting, if at all possible. Commissioners, the first thing we have is the work session agenda. There are some changes to be found, and also we need to move items 4.11, 4.12, and 4.13 to the very beginning, to be the first three items that we do. I'll move them out of order, and I'll explain why in just a little bit. So may I have a motion to approve the work session agenda with the changes? I have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Good enough. Okay, so the first thing we're going to talk about, 411, 412, and 413 all go together. They're Human Services Transportation Department. Randy Bass is here. Do you want me to explain why we need to move it up? Do you want you to explain?
We can.
Together, how you want to do
sure.
that?
These three items are grants that require public hearings. However, if you hold your public hearing on the 18th, which is our regularly scheduled meeting, they will be, the deadline is on the 15th. Your meeting's not till the 18th. So after your discussion, if you approve these grants to move forward, you will need to recess until the 15th and hold a public meeting on that day, on that Friday, for just these particular items. So with that in mind, you have it there. That's why we're moving it up, because if you do approve them, then Mr. Bass is going to immediately have to go publish a public hearing notice for that date. So.
And we just learned that right before walking in.
Right.
Yes.
And I'm not certain if Mr. Bass knows that yet.
Yes.
The 15th is a Friday, because we have to give 10 days notice for a public hearing. So if you will, do you want to go ahead and start with the 5311 grant and explain that to us, please?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
We are here to seek your approval for us to apply for the 5311 grant. This is an administrative grant that we receive funding for from the state and federal government. This grant helps with salaries, it helps with capital equipment purchases, insurance, telephones, copy machines, marketing, supplies, things of that nature that go into our operation. And what we're asking for this evening is our request to hold the public hearing for this grant, and also authorization for Mr. Downs to sign the agreement for that as well.
And Commissioners, I do want to draw to your attention, I placed at your seat a handout. It's 2 pages, it's 3 pages. The first is front and back, trying to save a little paper there. To be honest with you, I do serve on the Transportation Advisory Committee. That's a fairly new appointment for me. And in all honesty, I get a little confused on what each of these grants stand for. I think if you work with it, it makes sense what a 5311 means, but if we don't see it but once a year, I really don't. So what I got from Randy is a spreadsheet or table on the different grants that are in transportation, so that you can see what the grant name, what the grant covers, the amount of the grant, and any county match that's required, and for some of these on a county match, where that money comes from. So the first one, 5311, is that very first row that covers, this is a federal grant, is that right?
Yes, ma'am.
It's federal dollars. There is a county match that goes along with it. However, it does cover 85% of, is that fair to say, administrative cost of running
Our transportation
your
department.
transportation department?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. To make sure that I want to make sure that I understood it well enough for tonight. So Questions concerning the 5311 grant, please?
The matching funds that we supply for that grant, are those coming out of the general fund, or is that involved in some of these other grants?
No, this particular grant, Mr. Morris, it comes out of our general fund here. Yes, sir, it does.
Thank you.
What is that amount?
It's $56,966 total, sir.
This is all federal dollars.
Yes,
From
sir.
the federal government.
Yes, sir.
Without this grant, we would use just under $380,000 of local dollars in order to have a transportation department.
Correct.
Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Any other questions concerning this grant?
Mr. Bass, I have a question. And first, I want to tell you thank you for, Randy's been working with me this week and giving me all sorts of great statistics, and I really appreciate that. That's been very helpful. And he also pointed, he probably wouldn't want me to say this, but he pointed out to me that sometimes the attorney in me comes out a little bit, and that's true. He correctly pointed that out, and I'm sorry about that. I don't try to
okay.
do that. I'm going to try to be as non-attorney as I can, but go through some questions with you.
Sure.
So you had given me some statistics relating to the fact it looks like, so these are 5310. We have 16,000 trips that come out of this. How does that, Medicaid trips are 41,662. So are those Medicaid trips self-funded? Are they funded entirely through the Medicaid program? Or these grants, they all seem to go together as a puzzle, and I'm trying to figure that puzzle out a little bit better.
Right.
So I'm curious about that.
Certainly. The grants themselves all really come together to help the fact that we are a coordinated system where that all of the funding that comes in helps offset the cost of services in all three programs. Actually, this past year, actually the past 2 years, we've been working with Health and Human Services. They were looking at actually taking some of those Medicaid trips and going to a broker system, went out for an RFP, came back in, did their due diligence. At the end of the day, what they realized was that by being coordinated where we have seniors, Medicaid, and general public all utilizing the same equipment together, it helps reduce the overall cost to all three different programs. So if we remove funding from one specific program, it does drive up the cost for the other remaining programs as well. So each program is actually helping each other out by giving us the funding to help keep the overall cost low altogether. And that's part of the puzzle that a lot of people don't realize, is that by utilizing this equipment in a coordinated fashion, having all three different programs using the same equipment, same drivers, sharing those trips together, helps keep the cost low for everybody.
Would you say that without this grant, we could continue doing Medicaid trips?
We could continue to do the Medicaid trips, but the cost would be considerable to the general fund for Cabarrus County citizens. It would have a tremendous impact on the general fund.
And I looked through your application for this grant specifically, and I have a couple of questions about that. I know that we are not applying for operational funds, but when it talked about the operations that are eligible for this grant, it talked about that we have a specific route for pickup and delivery of passengers to specific locations. Each fixed route trip serves the same origins and destinations, unlike demand-responsive taxicabs and subscription service routes. And then when it got to the point where we talked about what kinds of routes we were using, all of the boxes for demand response and subscription were checked. And so that goes against the operational definition of the grant for this program. And I was just curious, it just made me think about that a little bit. Can you give me some explanation on that?
Are you talking about the 5316 JARC?
No, the 5310 grant, and it's, let me see if I can figure out what page I'm talking about.
Okay. can I interject for a second?
I'm
That one's
sorry.
the next one. 5310 is the next one.
I actually meant the 53, this is item 411 on our agenda,
Okay, that's fine.
correct?
That's 5311.
Yeah,
I just want to make sure
5311.
I was with you too.
Okay, and I have page, so they don't give us hard copies of these anymore, otherwise I would just flip to my page and read it to you. Let me see if I can, it says, page 106, is my reference here, so, yeah, under number 4, it says type of service, check all that apply, and it is demand response and subscription. On page 98, it gave me the definition here. And on page 98 is where it had that, Section 5311 operating funds can only be used to support rural general public routes. Now, so that was my question to you. We are not using these for operating. Is that how we get around these definitional problems?
Right, the definition that we give in that is our overall system, everything we do, which we do subscription and demand response. And it's apart from the two other grants, the JARC and the 5310.
Okay. I noted TJ's Taxi will get, does that show that they will get $250,000 under this grant?
Yes, sir, they will. Right now, we do not have enough resources, drivers, equipment of our own to meet all the current demand levels that we have, so we have to supplement our forces with that service.
Okay. I'm just,
They do not, however, get that up front. They're
right.
reimbursed per trip, so it may or may not be that much.
Do they give us any sort of a discount for these trips?
We have a contract with them with a standard rate in there.
Okay. Yeah, those are the questions that I had on this one. Thank you.
Chris, I'm sorry.
What does TJ's Taxi charge per trip?
The way they're set up, Mr. Burge, they send a zone, so depending
All
on
right,
the
let's
address.
say a minimum trip.
What would you say about it?
Oh, they have done some trips for us as cheap as $1. If it was in the, short zone to another short zone, most expensive would be probably 30.
Do they haul just one person at a time, or do they pick up maybe 2 or 3 people?
Well, they have cars, they have one van. Their van they use on the morning trips, they probably get 8 to 10 people at a time on that. The cars, they can only get maybe 2. But they also handle our Medicaid trips that we have that go to Duke Hospital and Winston-Salem.
I noticed, I can't find it right now, but somewhere in here it says that Obama put $10 billion in this program.
It's on page 88.
Is it 88? Okay. Was that stimulus money?
I believe it was, yes, sir.
What happens next year or the year after when that money runs out?
In which grant?
In all of them.
At this point,
All of them come out of the same fund, I think, don't they?
they all come from the federal under the FTA, yes, sir. And at this point, I have no idea what they'll do next.
Well, I just wonder where they're gonna keep getting the money from.
I had one other question, Randy. On page 107, it talks about our fleet size, and it said the revenue vehicle inventory by category, and you have 7 for conversion van, 16 for lift-equipped van, and 9 for 20-foot LTV. And then when it talked about fleet size, it only had 19 vans, or I'm sorry, 16 total revenue and 3 backups, and those numbers just didn't add up, so I was just curious as to what the discrepancy was between those two things.
Probably a typo.
Okay, I wasn't sure if there was a reason to look at that.
I'll have to look at it and see what
When you were talking about not having the proper amount of
Equipment, yes, sir.
equipment, I was wondering if something was in there that was causing an issue.
I just have one question for you. As you said, this grant pertains through the 3 programs that we'll have. Now, if we apply for this grant and obviously receive the grant, and say, for instance, one of the programs will not be approved, then what happens to the additional funds that you would not otherwise need?
If we lose one of the specific grants, then we would have to evaluate the impact that would have on the general fund, of course. And then, as I mentioned earlier, that all of these are interconnected that help keep the costs low, so that would have an impact on that as well. We can look at how we might be able to reallocate some of those resources into doing some other functions as well.
Right.
So we'd take a look at it and see.
Okay. But this grant being the administrative portion of it, so as I said, if one of the programs go away, then will this grant in turn reduce?
No, this grant would probably remain the same. It's like I said, it's offset the cost of our insurance. They help cover the cost of our total, some of our operational costs and things of that nature. So it doesn't actually get into driver salaries or anything of that nature. It mainly covers administrative type functions and things of that nature.
Okay. And so the process this evening is going to be to decide whether or not to have the public hearing, and we're also going to approve applying for the grant, or we're going to do that after the public hearing?
Yeah, what I'd like to do today is talk about all 3 of these and then have a general conversation about transportation and that department, because if we don't apply for these, then that greatly affects transportation department. We would call for a public hearing on the 15th, 10 days out, and we would vote after the public hearing.
Okay.
Presuming, I can't say that nobody would speak at the public hearing. Our public hearings don't tend to be hotbeds of activity. How's that? Okay. So, but we would have to decide a time on the 15th that we could meet, because everything would have to be submitted before 5 o'clock.
Right. Okay. I just want to
Does
make
that
sure we were all clear. Yeah. When.
Yeah. And it
okay.
probably didn't explain that well
That's
enough.
fine.
So. Any other questions on the 5311? Okay, let's go ahead and talk about the 5310, the elderly and disabled grant funding.
Okay. I'm going to let Bob talk about that. He really worked quite heavily on that and pulled all that information together.
Okay, we received the 5310 elderly and disabled grant for the first time 2 years ago. Prior to that, the only funding available for senior transportation was through the HCCGB block grant. But that only gave us enough money to provide service for about 6 months out of the year. And then we had to limit it to just medical meal sites and had a waiting list of 60 to 100 people. We discovered this grant. We went to a meeting in Charlotte, found out at that time that we could use state grants to match the federal grant. So 2 years ago, we applied for and received the 5310. We hired 3 drivers, 3 vehicles, and we were able to use the rope funds as a match for that grant, and part of the HCCGB grant as the other part of that match to match the 50%, and we were able to get that grant without using any general fund money. What we're hoping to do now that this program's up and running, and with the senior population growing the way it is, we have applied again this year for another 2-year grant for $660,361. What we hope to do is hire 3 more drivers and purchase 4 more vehicles to have a spare, so that we can increase the trips for the seniors even more and possibly open up the new meal site in Midland that has not had any transportation service. We were planning on using $82,000 of the HCCGB, which we will still do. We have received a letter of support from them to do that. And we were going to use $82,000 of the rope. With the rope now not being passed, we would have to look to the general fund to cover those $82,000. And of course, we could decide not to go after the grant, in which case we would have to look at possibly going back to running it the way we were, or some other alternatives. Anything to add?
That's good.
Okay, now this is 5310 is elderly and handicapped.
Correct.
both.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And you're looking to expand trips for the elderly, and so does this provide, if you said the HCCGB provides 6 months, does this provide the other 6 months?
With this grant, we were able, with the grant we received 2 years ago, eliminate the waiting list. And we were starting to expand trips to other quality of life trips such as shopping and hair appointments and just general quality of life. We were hoping to expand it even further now, and because we keep getting calls more and more every day, the population, senior population just keeps growing. And we were going to start opening trips to the meal site in Midland and expand it even further.
Okay, but if this one, if we did not apply for the 5310, okay, I just want to make sure I understand, then that means that we would have the HCCGB, but that would only do 6 months. It would scale it back, and it would be for only 6 months of the year, not 12 months of the year.
There would only be enough money to do 6 months of the year.
Okay. That's where I was making sure that I
Right.
understood correctly.
Yes,
One
ma'am.
And
thing
there
to
would be a waiting
expand, it's
list.
one thing to get through a year. So
Right.
those were two different things. I wanted to make sure I was understanding you correctly. So Commissioners, questions that you have on the 5310 grant?
Whenever originally, before it was expanded, whenever you were just working with the was it HCB?
HCG,
Yeah,
yes, sir.
grant, and you only were able to provide 6 months of the service, were the trips prioritized to meal sites rather than shopping or,
That was all we did, was meal sites and medical.
meal sites?
There
and
was no
medical?
shopping or
Okay.
extracurricular.
And so how does that work now? Somebody wants to go shopping, you pick them up and drop them off. Is there limited places? They can go anywhere? Does the driver wait on them?
No, the driver doesn't wait. It works like our other trips. They have to schedule. They have to be a client in our system set up through Department of Aging. And they just call and schedule it within our hours, and we take them and they call for their return. They still have to fall within our travel
And what we're
restrictions.
doing is we're serving other clients, from other programs while they're taking care of that. And then when they make their phone call for the return trip, we then dispatch one of our operators over there to pick them up.
Okay. How much have you been able to expand this program since we first applied for this grant, as far as client trips or?
Well, we've eliminated everybody off the waiting list.
And how many was that?
I think it was close to 100 people. It was started out at 60, and it had creeped up near 100 when we got the grant.
Okay.
I was a little bit confused on the matching numbers, looking at this chart that we have. On the 5310, it shows a total match of $330,180, and it's saying $165,090 from ROPE, and then the rest from HCCGB. Is that for 2 years, where you were
2
given
years.
the one-year numbers, right?
The 82,000 was a year.
Was
For
a year.
one year?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so if we apply for and receive this 5310 grant, then that means we're going to have to come up with $82,000 per year for 2 years out of the general fund, since we turned down the other grant at the last meeting.
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Okay. So that is $165,000 that we have refused, that are state grant funds that come from our state gasoline taxes that all our taxpayers pay.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Burridge, do you have anything?
I have a couple of questions on this grant as well. Our EdTap portion of ROAP was $104,000. Is that right?
On the EdTap?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yeah. And that was for 1 year. And so that plus $30,000 from the, is it HCCBG grant, covered this program for 7 months, which is about, say, $140,000. This grant would give us $330,000 in addition to that. So we were able to operate the program for 7 months on $140,000, and so we need $330,000 to operate it for the next 5 months.
Part of this, in this, included in this number, are also some of the capital purchases that would be in the first year, part of that would not be in the second year, part of that. So the first year part would actually be to go to help get the equipment on board and also the operators as well. And then into the second year, we wouldn't be purchasing any additional capital at that time, but we wouldn't have the drivers on board.
Now,
That 330 is for 2 years, I'm sorry.
Yeah, for 2
Instead of 5
years.
more months, it would be for a year plus 5 months, would be 17 months to get
well,
through
it's
the
it's
the difference.
$660,000 for 2 years.
Yeah, I know, but you said for 5 more months.
Right. So
But
330 would apply
330.
to each year.
330 is for 2 years.
The total grant is $660,361 for 2 years.
For 2 years, and
Right.
then the match.
So half of that.
50% match, wouldn't that also be for 2 years?
Yes.
2 years.
It just so happens that the 50% match is the same number. You have $330,000 of the total grant is going to go to the first year, and $330,000 of the total grant is going to go to the second year, right, of the total? Right. And so if EdTap and HCCBG got us through 7 months, then $330,000, which is half of the total, is needed to get us through the next 5 months. And so that just seems a little, well, highly disproportional. I mean, it takes us twice as much to get through the last 5 months as it does through the first 7 months.
Is that, does that include your vehicles in that?
In the first,
4 vehicles and 3 drivers
yes, sir.
in that $330,000?
Yes, sir.
And what's those vehicles cost? Depending on how they're equipped, I know.
The equip, yes, sir. It
Some of
can
it could be
$50,000,
$60,000,
$54,000.
They're $60,100 apiece.
$60,100 apiece for 4 of them. So that's $240,000 out of that $330. Not counting your foot.
And,
You
No,
drive
that's
it.
separate, that's capital.
yeah,
That's not in that. Capital, the capital for the vehicles is $242,800, which would be a local match of $24,280 one time.
And that leaves you the rest for the 3 drivers.
And then, yeah, the operating would be for the 3 drivers.
So we have, if a client needs these services, we send a bus or a van out to their house to pick them up, is that right?
Correct.
Yeah. And that's one of the other things that I am somewhat concerned about, is sending a whole bus out to a person's house, for instance, an elderly person, to pick them up and take them to a hair appointment. I see the buses all over town. Some of these issues came up a few years ago, and anecdotally, I just started, when I see those buses, looking at them. And I would say 90% of the time, I see them with 1 person or 0 people on them. And that concerns me, to be honest with you. That just doesn't seem like a great use of that resource, and you know, in a area where we do have to be a little bit environmentally conscious because of our air quality and things like that, that concerns me a little bit.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Sorry, because you said that, and I was trying to make sure I understood. The buses are not the CK Transit, that's City of
have
Concord,
nothing
City
to
of
do.
Kannapolis. Your bus has how many seats?
8 to 10, depending on the vehicle. We have 2 different types.
Okay.
The CCTS vehicles
That
that you
sounds
see.
like a van, not a bus.
Yes,
Well,
ma'am.
some
So
of
I
them
wanna
are
make sure-
vans.
That's okay, I just want to make sure what the terminology, because when I think of a bus, I think of the
Yeah.
CK Rider that'll carry, I don't know how many they can get on there, 45 or 50.
And-
So are
and
you
part of
talking about a
that-
45 or 50 bus, or are you talking about a bigger van?
A lot of
I
that
understand.
room is actually taken up because the wheelchair positions that we have 2 wheelchair positions on there, so that we can accommodate at least 2 wheelchairs at one time on the vehicles, and that takes up a lot of the space on our vans, so.
Sure. And I didn't mean to imply that it was a big city transit bus, sort of like a church bus that you
And I
see.
knew you weren't implying that. I just
Yeah.
want to make sure I understood, because I want to make sure that I wasn't, when I see bus, I think
Sure.
big, not small.
Yeah.
And I just want to make sure that I didn't want anybody listening, if I'm confused, I figured somebody else might be. So
Sure.
that's why I asked for a point of clarification. Go ahead.
The
Sorry.
things that I've seen are basically two products. What most people would think of as a van, and then the second product is the side entry door with a tall roof and a little bit longer, and it sort of looks like a shorter bus or something like that, something a cross between a bus and a van.
Right.
I am trying to get as much information out of these grants as I can. It does bother me. I won't hide the fact that it bothers me that we are taking money from the federal government to take people to get their hair done. That is a concern of mine, on shopping trips and things like that. And there are tremendous benefits of some of these programs, and there are wastes in some of these programs. And I'm bothered by the fact that in order to accept the benefits, we have to accept the waste. And so I'm going to work with you more, Randy, in the next 10 days. I'm going
Certainly.
to approach that with some urgency, and I'm going to come up and see some of the stuff that you do and try to work on a schedule with you and
Sure.
figure out how we can make some of this work. But I really do have concerns about waste in some of these programs and what the money's going for, particularly that's coming from the federal government. And we owe so much money and have such huge deficits right now.
Any other questions or comments on the 5310? Okay. The next one is the 5316 JARC grant funding.
Yes, this is the one that we utilize to help transport individuals to jobs and work. This is the one that we have requested for the next 2 years, $564,122. It's a 2-year grant. This is where we have the partnership with the CVO, the vocational workshop individuals, and these individuals are employed and trained at the workshop, and the majority of those trips are dedicated to helping get those individuals over to the facility and back again. These individuals do receive, additional training there, and they have piecemeal work that they work with the CVO on. It's been a very good partnership, especially for the families that have these individuals who are challenged in some ways, and yet they're able to get gainful employment at this workshop and work on a number of things that they have going there. Then the peripheral items, we do cover the Midland, Mount Pleasant areas with this to help get those people who need assistance from more rural areas. This was established then to bring them into the core, to employment centers such as Concord Mills, the hospitality industry over in that area, the hotels and the shops in that area. And it also interfaces with the CK Rider service, so they can transfer from the this program onto the CK Rider and then go to additional destinations for employment opportunities in those areas as well. So we are seeking your help on applying for this 2 years as well.
Okay, questions about the JARC grant?
The first question I have is, it says the new grant will expand to provide the transportation to and from the Cabarrus Vocational Opportunity Workshop. I thought we were already currently doing that.
We are, and they still have additional needs that arise that we just can't meet with our current staffing levels. Given the routing that we do and the timing of these specific areas, we can only cover, a certain portion on those routes, and they still have additional individuals that are coming into the workshop who are needing the assistance. It's just that we're not able to accommodate them right now.
Okay. What percentage of the clients of this program are transported to this workshop, would you say?
Right now, in the JARC program itself, we are transporting, I think we had said about 65%.
62.5.
62.5% of our trips in the JARC program are dedicated to the CVO.
To the workshop?
Yes, sir. Okay.
When you make a trip to the workshop, is it correct that there are all of these programs represent people that may be on the same vehicle.
Yes, sir. We have set up specific routing to help accommodate the individuals. So they're picking up multiple passengers along the route, and then they are dropping them off at the workshop, and then we do a return process in the afternoon where we pick up all those same individuals and we will be taking them back
Right.
to their locations.
So if we send a vehicle to Midland to pick up folks that may be involved in this, if we stopped doing that, then we may very well be sending the same vehicle to the same location to pick up somebody from a different program.
That's true, sir.
So they all coordinate together.
You're right. That's that shared ride coordinating
Right.
factor that we are trying to utilize so that if we have multiple customers in the same locations, we're trying to coordinate. That's one of the great advantages of the software that we utilize. It helps us better do that so that we're matching these people up in a more consistent manner
Right.
to utilize the equipment much better.
And I would assume that when those drivers complete those trips in the morning, taking those people to the workshop, then they probably began some of the medical appointment trips, and which they may be dropping off one person at the mall to take care of their shopping needs, and then another person at the doctor's office across the street, et cetera.
Yes, sir.
And so if we were to eliminate some of those trips, then that means what would we do with those drivers? Would it be possible for you to employ drivers? Or would it be difficult for you to employ drivers just to work in the morning and the afternoon when these other trips are occurring?
Well, one of the things, is, as we have already said earlier, is that we have a tremendous demand in the Medicaid field where we're utilizing the taxi services.
Right.
If I have to redeploy resources or anything of that nature, we've had discussions about putting that emphasis on those areas as well to help reduce, because we can actually do those trips more efficient and cheaper utilizing our own resources than we can by using the cab. So anything that I can redirect into that area would be very useful in terms of reducing the overall dependency on cabs as well.
Right. So the cost per trip on any one of these trips is going to rise significantly if we eliminate any part of the program.
That's true. The overall cost for providing that service, because the mileages are going to still be there and the cost is still going to be consistent. It's just that we won't have as much revenue coming in to help cover the cost from the different grants.
Right. And so some of the folks that are taking advantage of these services, particularly the job-related ones, were it not for this service, they probably would not be able to be employed.
That's correct, sir. We do have a number of people who are utilizing the service to get to and from employment, and we would have to give, of course, notification to them that the services are going to change, and that particular program would no longer be available to them.
Right. Thank you.
Would some of the individuals that are being transported to the workshop qualify for one of the other programs like the handicap or disabled?
It depends on how they would be evaluated. One area that we could have looked at is if we had the rural general public, the RGP program available, we could have potentially transitioned those into the RGP program, but that's not available now, so we would have to look at other possibilities. But at this point, it doesn't look like all of them would be covered by any other programs.
Right. But potentially majority of them, or?
Majority, I would say.
Yeah.
I've heard it said for several years out of this commission that if we do not give people a ride to work, they will be on welfare. And I just take 100% exception to that comment. I started working when I was 15 years old. I was ineligible to have a driver's license, and I ran to work. I rode my bike in the rain. I found a ride. People could move closer to a bus stop. They could get a job closer to a bus stop. They could buy themselves a bike. They could get themselves a moped. They could find themselves a cheap car. People are going to find a way to get to work if they want to get to work. And I take exception that if the government does not provide something for them, that they will be government dependents. I think people, I give people much more credit than you do, I think, Commissioner Morris.
Okay, though not one of these three, can I ask you about the HCCGB? What's the timeline on that? So has that one already been
Yeah,
applied for?
that's administered through the Department of Aging.
Okay, that's
and-
Department of Aging. You just receive funds for it that you can
Correct.
use?
Yes, ma'am.
Correct.
Okay. And then ROPE is the one that we had on our agenda the last meeting.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And the ROPE, which you did not say the last meeting, but you have been using ROPE funding towards the local match.
That's
That's
correct.
required, so that it didn't come out of the general fund.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. All right, Commissioners, we have before us these three different grants. We also need to decide about having a public hearing on the 15th, or we would recess this meeting to a meeting on the 15th in order to have a public hearing. Without a public hearing, then we would not apply for any of these. We are required to have a public hearing for them. So I would ask if you have any other comments that you want to make about transportation or these grants or transportation in general. Let me know, are you available on the 15th, that we would be able to set a public hearing? We have to decide that before 5 o'clock so they can get it out to notify if we're having a public hearing. So can you I don't care which one, who starts. I will tell you on the 15th, I have a morning meeting in Charlotte. I think I can be back by 12. But I cannot get out of the morning meeting. So if you could meet sometime in the afternoon before, I don't know how much time.
Everything's ready. Everything would be, as far as paperwork, everything's ready to go. It's just a matter of the board approving and then us signing the documents and wiring them to Raleigh. So you could go anywhere up to probably 4 o'clock would be okay.
Who's going to show up on the 15th for a public hearing?
Same people that showed up at our last meeting for a public hearing. I have no idea.
I don't think so.
We can't wait till the 18th. If we wait till the 18th, we pass the deadline.
Why did we put it off this long?
I'll let Mr. Bass answer that. They filled out the paperwork and got it to this agenda. Go ahead.
Right, and we had all of these, the grants that came in, and to process each one and to gather all the information and look at the due diligence of what was needed. It took us this amount of time to pull all this information together and prepare it so that we could bring it before you.
Do you know what the total amount of grants, funds are for the transportation department, for this transportation system?
I can get that for you, Mr. Burge.
I'd like to have that.
Sure.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would be interested in knowing the total. Well, I would assume that would be your budget for your department, but also how much we contribute locally, our local matches, the total number of that for the programs that we've been involved in the past.
Sure, we can get that out to you tomorrow.
So do you need that for your decision? Because we have it in summary format if you want me to go get it.
Yeah, it should
How
be.
many years has this program been going on?
Which one, Mr. Burge?
These three we're talking about now.
We're in our second year of the 5310 for the seniors. We've had the JARC grant going on 4 years now total. And of course, the 5310 has been continuous every year.
5311.
5311, I'm sorry, has been continuous every year as part of the administrative process.
What did people do before we started these grants?
That I don't know.
I think if we look back at some of our community needs assessments that have been done over the years that have involved the Health Alliance as well as United Way and some other agencies, this topic is one that has been recurring for quite a few years. When we go out and talk to citizens and try to determine what their needs are and what problems they have overcoming, transportation has been high on the list, I think, each time we've had those needs assessments. So that's what it's a combination probably of government and volunteer organizations in trying to see how we can improve the quality of life of people in our county and how we can try, particularly with seniors, to keep them healthier, longer, and still in their homes and able to take care of themselves, which is at a much lower cost than the alternative. So in my opinion, a lot of these programs are very preventive in nature. If we can enable people to be self-sufficient and stay in their homes longer, then their quality of life is going to be better. They're going to be happier, and the public cost is probably going to be lower. So that's my interpretation of what our transportation programs do. In regards to the people that are involved in the workshops, I'm sure that there are some families of some of those clients that would be able to make alternative arrangements to transport them. Equally, there are quite a few families that absolutely could not do that. If you've got a dependent that's in that situation and unable to care for themselves and work a regular job like the rest of us would be able to work, that is their only opportunity to be productive, also, and to provide that bit of relief to these families, which and they do a marvelous job with. It goes back to a lot of other things we talk. It's dealing with playing the cards you've been dealt. And some folks have not been as lucky as others as far as some of the individuals that are involved at the workshop that have disabilities of one form or another. But this provides those families an opportunity also to work and be productive at the same time that these workshop clients get a feeling of self-worth. So, I mean, it's a plus all the way around as far as I'm concerned. If it's, the funds, I guess the one question that I would have about the funds that we receive from these grants, if we are to refuse these funds, then am I correct in saying that just means they will probably be reallocated to another community where they can take advantage of them?
Yes, sir.
So the federal government's not going to be sending me a refund check because our community chose not to accept the funds, nor are they going to reduce the cost of the program. It'll just mean more people will be served in other areas of the country and the state.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Okay, and I hate to rush everybody, but I'm trying to watch the clock.
Well,
Go
I
ahead,
just
do you
have
want to
a
make
quick state. Yeah.
quick comment?
Commissioner Morris, I don't disagree with you. The quality of life is very important for the senior population or the disabled, anyone that doesn't have access to the transportation. That does hinder their quality of life, and I completely agree with that and understand that. And, as I see my grandparents getting older or my parents getting older, I want to ensure they have the best quality of life as well. I think the root of the problem that I see here is that the more that local governments utilize grants from the federal government, the state government, the higher our taxes are going to be in return, which I think hinders my quality of life. Is, that as Mr. Burridge has mentioned many times about the federal government, the more and more debt that the federal government accumulates, the more taxes we're going to end up having to pay, because we're the ones that's going to have to be paying the bill. And I think in turn that's going to reduce my quality of life in the future. So, I think we all agree that the quality of life is important. It's just how do we achieve that? And my belief is that certainly keeping the taxes low over a period of years is going to increase my quality of life, so I can save for my own or help with my parents or grandparents. And so I don't think any of us disagree that.
Can I interject on a
Because
procedural?
we got 5 minutes.
Yep.
We have to make a decision if we're
What-
going to meet on the 15th.
Why don't we make the decision about that, and then let's continue this conversation. I have a comment, but from a procedural perspective, let's
Yep.
get these guys.
We need to,
yeah.
can I see a show of hands of who is willing to have a meeting on the 15th? Okay. Is there a time anybody would prefer? 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock?
How about 2 o'clock?
2 o'clock.
Friday, 15th, 2 o'clock.
Commissioner Morris, can you do that?
2 o'clock is fine.
Commissioner Burge, can you do that?
I think so.
Commissioner Osterreich, can you do
That
that?
is great with me.
Okay, so, may I have a motion? I think we need to do it as a motion, correct? Yes. Okay. Well, let me just make the motion so that I get it, make sure I get it right for everybody. That at the end of this meeting, we will recess this meeting, and we will convene on Friday, November 15th at 2 p.m. in the Board of Commissioners chamber, the main room. This one's reserved already, for the purpose of a public hearing for the 5311 grant, the 5310, and the JARC grant. Okay, I will make that as a motion.
Second?
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, so I don't know who needs to get the notice out, but if you need to sprint. Okay, they need to go in order to get that notice out. However, and I also want to say, normally, as you all know, we typically would do the schools first. They have a 6 o'clock meeting that they're up against for getting to that one. So, brief comments on this. We can bring this back up when we get further in the agenda where it normally would have come. But if anybody wants to make a comment right now.
My only comment would be that this comment was made at both our regular Board of Commission meeting, and I think you've made it a couple times, Commissioner Morris, that if we don't take the money, somebody else will get it. Well, that line of logic has been rejected since you were a little kid. When you would tell your mom something, she would say, if all of your friends were doing that, would you jump off a bridge too? We have control over this county. That is the only area that I have domain over. That is our jurisdiction, and I'm going to vote to do the best things for this county. If everybody else wants to take the federal government money and flush it down the toilet, I don't control them, but I do control this. And as long as I am here sitting in this seat, I'm going to try to do the best things for the residents of Cabarrus County. And if people want to hold it against me that I'm trying to do something different and trying to lead and trying to get past a $17 trillion deficit in the smallest ways that we can, well, hold it against me. But I'm not going to do something because everybody else is doing it. That's not a good line of logic for me.
I think you've somewhat oversimplified what I was talking about, and my response to you and to Commissioner Meismer as well would be exactly what you just said. I was elected to do what is best for the people of Cabarrus County. If I were going to tackle the decisions of the federal government, then I should have run for Congress. If I were going to tackle the decisions of the state of North Carolina, I should run for the House or the Senate. Those folks have made the decision as to how these funds will be allocated. I think to say that we do it just because everybody else does it is not a fair representation of what I'm saying. What I'm saying is these funds have been allocated for these purposes, and they're going to be spent for that. For us to deprive Cabarrus County citizens who have paid those taxes, paid their federal taxes, their state taxes, of those services, and send it to another area of the state or the country is not best representing the needs of Cabarrus County citizens.
I would say one more point, that when you take people that are perfectly capable, now I would say most of these services are for people that do need government help, and I have no problem with that. But it's becoming more and more that more people are getting government assistance that really don't need it. And as you make dependents out of people that really don't need it, that has a long-term detriment to this county. And I don't want to make dependents out of our citizens. I want to enable them to be able to be independent and to get the satisfaction out of knowing that they have a job well done, that the government didn't come and give them a ride when they could have done it themselves. And I don't think that we've done an adequate job in America of really looking at, or we haven't done an adequate job in this county of looking at how, when we continually make dependents out of people that don't need to be made a dependent of, how that impacts our community.
Okay, Commissioners, let's move on, please. I'm sure that this will be a continued discussion item. Next, the first item, if we go back to 3.1, is the update on the QSCB bonds. We have Lynn Whitke here. We have Kelly Klutz here. I don't know, Kelly, if you want to come up with this also. And if we can, let's do 3.1, then let's do 4. Let's do the school items next. Let's see. I guess the other one after that would be 4.1, and then we'll come back. I'm sorry for going out of order. I'd like to help them get to their meeting, because I know that they're probably stressed. So QSCBs, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon, Commissioners. Excuse me. I'd like to just take you through the milestones quickly. Really, things are really coming to a slow but final end. For the most part, the projects you see, the first 4 projects are very close to completion. Windows and doors, we're in the process of getting the last receipt from the last contractor who worked on doing the punch list items for that project. And as soon as we have that, our attorney will be communicating with the bonding company and closing out that project for us. The gym addition, I'll speak momentarily about that. The project is, for all intents and purposes, substantially complete. However, we have some paving needs, and as I said, I'll talk to that in a moment. With the boilers at Mount Pleasant High School, the boilers are now, I'm going to say 95% complete. When this document was done, it was, we were still waiting for stacks to come in. Those came in, they were installed, and the boilers are fully operational. We are in the process of replacing one of the control panels, which is as old as the building, which puts it in the mid-20-year range. We would like to eventually replace both of those. There's 2 additional control panels that control the boiler system and a lot of the heating systems, related heating system components in the building. And again, I'll mention that as we get into the budget items. The weight room and voc ed building at Concord is substantially complete. We're waiting for the landscaping to be done on that project and to move the weight equipment in. And the roof project at J.N. Freeze will begin very shortly. They've been basically cleaning up other work that had been delayed by rains in previous months, and now they will be starting the work hopefully this week on that project. And with that, I'll move quickly, if I can move to the budget sheet, and indicate, thank you. Really, we have funds that are available to us, and we're at this point in the situation in the QSCB projects that we can begin to talk about how we'd like to use the excess funding that we have. If you look to the far right, can you go up one page if you could? Thank you. You'll see a $7,199 figure. That is for the windows and doors replacement. Those dollars are unencumbered and for all intents and purposes are surplus to that project. And further down on the right-hand side, about midway down the page, is a $5,334 item. Those dollars are coming out of the electrical panels testing and corrections project, and those monies are also unencumbered. And those are the 2 figures that I would keep in mind as being monies that we have readily available to use on in whatever project we need to use them. I'll take you now back, and I hate to jump around, but if you could go back up to the top of that page. Nope, a little bit too far. Thank you. At the very top, or excuse me, I hate to do, it's the gym project at Northwest. We have approximately $25,122 remaining in that project. The project, as I mentioned, is for all intents and purposes substantially complete. What we have is work that needs to be done in the paving area in front of and next to the gymnasium. That was paving. I wish I had brought some pictures, but the subsoil there is terrible. It was literally paving that was put on dirt. And unfortunately, even some of the dirt's bad dirt. So we had, as we got into that project and we wanted to do the initial repair work and replacement of paving, we found that we didn't have the money for it. All we could do was put stone back in to at least allow us to move buses and cars in and out of the high school during the time that they opened the school in August. And we've been struggling with how we could get paving back on that stone. I was waiting to see how this would come out, and obviously, we'd like to, at this point, recommend that the $25,000 be put towards the repair and the paving of that area, which is now the main drive and exit way out. There are additional funds that we'll talk about in a few minutes that we'd like to also ask to be put towards additional paving, because in what they call the contractor's laydown area, which was immediately adjacent to the gymnasium itself, that area was really, again, because of the equipment and all the materials that were placed on it, and because of the bad soil, it was pretty well ruined in the process of construction. So we'd eventually like to replace that as well. But at least for this time being, we'd like to suggest earmarking this $25,000 to go towards the repair and paving of the exit route out of the parking lot. And then on the next page, I'll mention that the new boilers, as I said, at Mount Pleasant are complete. They're operational as we speak. What we found are that the control panels, there's 3 control panels that operate the entire building system, and they're all dated, parts are no longer available, and they should be replaced. We have enough money in the project itself to replace one of them, and we'd like to look at eventually replacing the other 2. We have a bid at the moment of just under $23,000, and as you can see, we have roughly $18,000 estimated, or almost $19,000 estimated for future expenses. Those future expenses are the control panels that I'm speaking of. So we're hoping that in looking at this number and some of the surplus funds that I just spoke of, that we can buy those 2 additional panels and close out that project completely. And then the final project that I have to talk about is the weight room and voc ed building. We have approximately $12,794 remaining in that project as contingency. We'd like to recommend that we be allowed to replace some of the weight room equipment that was going to be moved. What we're finding is that some of it is really unsafe to be continued in use. And so we'd like to use that money. And we've done this in a fashion in another project, and we checked with QSCB, and as long as the equipment is in fact integral to the operation of the building, that we can use the funds for that purpose. And we're suggesting, of course, that the weight room needs weight equipment in which to function, by which to function rather. So we'd like to suggest those funds to be used for that purpose. Any
Okay.
questions?
I was trying to make notes and keep track of that. So there are some funds available at Northwest Gym Addition that you want to use towards paving.
Yes,
Our
ma'am.
4.2 item is additional funds to be used for paving at the same place to do the whole project. Okay, so we're going to talk about that one in a second.
Yes.
At Mount Pleasant, you need additional funds in order to replace the control panels, which I may be going out on a limb here, but I think Commissioner Burridge would say is a good thing to do. Would that be correct? That's your area of expertise. Okay, so you're getting those funds from where?
I'm sorry, go ahead, Kelly.
Would be the remaining balance of Central Cabarrus replacement windows and doors, and the remaining balance in various schools' breaker panels.
Okay. And then you're saying that for the weight room vocational building, there's funds still in there?
$12,000.
It came in under budget, and you want to use the rest of those funds in the same project?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes,
I just
ma'am.
want to make sure I was following along with you.
Mhm.
Do you have, are there, every project, let me make sure I understood correctly. for every project that you did, you had some contingency funds available for each of the projects.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So have you reconciled for any of the projects that are 100% complete? Are there any other contingency funds out there that you're still going to have to move? And we're going to get that. I guess what I'm leading to is that you have a final date where the funds have to be expended and the project's completed,
Yes, ma'am.
which, if I remember correctly, is April. Is that right?
April.
Okay.
2014.
So do you have more, next month, you're going to come back with more contingency monies that are not being used that you need to put towards a project, or are you getting close to?
I wish Kelly had
Closing
a
them
deep
out.
hole full of money, but no.
If there were contingency funds, you would see them in the column there that says contingency for open projects, and the only ones that have a balance there are the Northwest High School Project Gym Addition, which is $25,122, and we want to use that for the parking lot. The other one that has contingency for open projects is $12,794, and that's the weight room that we will now want to use for equipment. So those are the only projects that have a contingency.
Okay, so if they're complete, there's no funds left there that you're going
Funds
to
left.
pick from anything else? Okay, so we're not going to be able to chip off another project somewhere? Okay,
No.
that's what I wanted to make sure of,
No.
because I knew you were getting close, but I wasn't, there's so much more detail in this one than what we've had to look at on some of the other ones. I just wanted to make sure, because I don't want you to get to April and there be money sitting there.
Right,
And I know you don't
absolutely.
want to either,
No.
so.
I would just
Um,
clarify on the Northwest, there'll be a line item for, we need field survey work done by an engineering firm to confirm quality of compaction and all of that. So there will be, in effect, engineering fees that will be spent out of that money as well.
Okay, but it's still for the parking lot?
It's related to the
Absolutely, yes.
paving. of the
Yes,
parking
Okay.
lot.
Sorry, I want to make sure that I was following along. Again, if I get confused, then I figure somebody listening at home will have a question. So, Jason, do you want to start on this one? Do you have any questions on these projects or comments?
No, are you going to stay around for the field project? I do have a question about that.
Yes, sir.
Okay, great, thank you.
Yeah, we'll do that one next. Let's skip over and do that next. Yes. Steve, do you have any questions on these?
Just one question. 4.2 on our
We're going to get to
agenda
that in just a second.
is the same,
Well, that's.
it's the same thing.
These
Similar.
requests are not on an agenda item, so that's all new, so we don't have this. No. The only thing we have is the sales tax and then $23,000 in additional,
Which is really 25 now.
no, it's 25 plus several other requests, so we just need to get that itemized.
I'm not following you, I'm sorry.
We have-
Okay, so we need, let me ask for clarification then. On the Northwest Gym Edition, where there's money left over, since it's still being used for that project, do they have to come back and ask that it goes towards parking at the same project? Or or do they have the latitude to assign that? I guess that would be the question.
How much was it?
$25,122.
So the whole project's going to be 89 plus 25
Right.
by the time we
What
end
I'm
the
saying
project.
is, the numbers we got this morning are not the numbers you're telling us now. So Pam, when she created the agenda item for you,
Mm-hmm.
has specific numbers in there, and these are not the ones that we're talking about.
Right, we had 23,000 this morning.
Because we didn't have the numbers in front of us, so
Right.
we were just talking on the phone. I
No,
didn't-
and we weren't talking anything about Mount Pleasant School or
No.
Concord School either. So we need
Because-
we need to amend this agenda item to include everything.
No, because we're going to bring you, once we settle on these ideas, we'll bring you a literal budget amendment next month. So we're just,
Okay, are you going to bring it next month, or are we going to, we have this item on for our meeting in 2 weeks. So are
Right.
you going to update the information and get it back to us so that we can approve all of these that you just said this month?
the sales tax, now, Mr. Bois presented the sales tax item to us, and we were asked to present that this month.
Right.
The other budget amendments, we would present next month. We planned on
Can
presenting
you
next month.
present those this month?
Can we?
I mean,
We
can
didn't-
you go ahead and do the Northwest parking lot so we get all of that in one item? Both funds?
We have that one. We have that in Pam's item. It includes the sales tax and the $23,000.
We don't need to move the $23,000. It's in
so
the
it's
same
good.
line item.
Okay. So on the weight equipment, do they need to have another item since it's in the same, it's already in that same project? Do they need to bring something to us for the
I
weight?
don't know. Have you vetted that through?
There's
our
no budget
council?
revision that would be necessary. and they're utilizing the funds in compliance with what the bond council would state. They can't
Yeah,
use it for equipment within
Typically, what
that.
that would be, if it's less than 25,000 or less, then we can do that internally. It would not need to come before you.
Okay, so your question is on this 25,000 for the gym
No.
addition, is that what
No,
you're asking?
what I'm asking is the line item that, or the agenda item that we're talking about right now is just a report. If you're going to approve anything, then we need to do it as an agenda item, which is 4.2. That's why I'm not quite sure
No,
what
I
you're
was, the
what you're
reason we were
doing.
presenting this was just telling you that we have places to spend all of the money remaining. That's all I
Okay.
meant to
All right.
to
And
suggest.
we'll give you a budget amendment.
Okay, because
Next
you were,
month.
because we hadn't even got to 4.2 yet, we
Right.
were already talking the others, and then we
So I
were
guess that
adding
would be,
additional projects.
for
so.
4.2, for clarification, or for simplicity, if we can make sure the item that we vote on in 2 weeks includes both this 25,000 amount and the sales tax amount, so it's all in there together, instead of doing it 2 different months, I think it would be clear, you'd have the money all right there.
But we're not
No,
moving
we
the
won't need- We won't need to
25,000.
do,
I thought that's what you were asking.
yeah, we only need to do the sales tax, but we
Okay.
haven't even got to 4.2. That's why I was
Okay.
a little confused, because
Yes.
we're asking for different numbers and different projects, and we haven't, and all this is supposed to be as a report
Okay,
as to the status.
okay.
Okay, all right.
I don't know if I got everybody more confused, I apologize.
okay.
I wanted to make sure from this report, if they had to have it as an agenda item from this report, and you're saying no.
No, I think the agenda item 4.2 is the only agenda item you will
Okay.
need at this time.
Then I'm good with that.
I have a
Yes.
question regarding the report.
Okay,
Um,
good.
For the weight room, the new equipment, what's the purpose of purchasing the new equipment, you said?
Well, some of the material, I don't have all the details, but some of the equipment that was going to be removed from the existing weight room area is no longer usable. It's hazardous to be used. So we're going to be doing an assessment of that with the AD, the athletic director of the school, and determine what pieces have to be replaced. There's also the intent to reuse the old weight room for a classroom and other spaces, and so some of that money will be spent in refurbishing that area. All we're saying is that we have ways of spending these dollars. It's within the
Right, I understand
allowed.
that it doesn't have to, yeah, it can be
Yeah.
reallocated,
Right,
you know,
that's all it
or
is.
in the same line item. I understand that.
Okay.
How about Central Cabarrus? There was, you know, concern brought about the leaking in their weight room and their equipment. Has there been anything done to address that or fix that?
We've replaced the roof.
Okay.
And so it is dry there now. So now it's really a cleanup fashion. I don't think that the equipment was damaged beyond repair or beyond refurbishing. I think it was mainly a cleanup of the equipment after we got a dry condition.
So their equipment is operational?
Yes. We will be meeting with them in 2 weeks, I believe.
Okay.
As part of our annual review, and we'll talk about that. So
Thank you.
you're welcome.
May I ask one more question on the report? Mr. Wicke, when I had gone out to Central Cabarrus, they had told me that their boosters had purchased all of their new weight equipment. And are we going to run into a problem if we buy Central or Concord new weight equipment, that all the other schools come back and say, we bought our own, and now you've bought Concord? Is that going to be an issue for us?
I think the way we've looked at, refurbishing, for example, dining room tables were part of the Concord High School project. And I think most of the staff and hopefully most of the boosters have understood that this was sort of a one-time opportunity. And we're trying to do the best and most complete project we can with the money available. And we haven't had a lot of pushback on that issue, so. You're welcome.
Okay. Any other questions about the report? Okay, let's go to 4.1, let's go to 4.2.
4.2.
Since we're already talking about the paving, let's just look at 4.2 for the paving.
Well, this project, as I described, is really to repair, it's to repair and refurbish the paving in front of the gymnasium and to the side. The work to the side of the gymnasium was originally part of the construction project. And unfortunately, like I said, we ran into something that no one anticipated in terms of the amount of bad soil that we had. And So the best that we could do under the budget allowed us at the time was, and within the money that the contractor had provided, was to remove the bad soil, remove the bad paving, remove the bad soil, and put back a firm base on which to run buses and cars. So if you drive out there today, you'll see crushed rock, and it's basically looks like a stone driveway rather than a paved driveway. And inherently, it has problems. So we're recommending that all of these funds be reallocated, and really with bond council's recommendation, to one project, and that would be at Northwest. I can tell you there's a great paving need throughout all of our schools. In this case, I don't think anyone anticipated how bad the soil was. We had areas where we had to remove 2 to 3 feet of soil because there were just pockets of nothing. Just you couldn't even get substance in your hands, and as such, we couldn't get a firm base on which to build a roadway. So that was something that was completely unexpected, and so we had the contractor do that portion of the work, and then as we look down the road, the rest of the money that would take. I believe I have the figures here. Approximately.
77,000.
Yeah, total of $77,000. That would also include, though, paving of what I call that laydown area by the contractor, where it was damaged due to the poor quality of soil underneath it. And so that's the area immediately next to the driveway and right behind the gymnasium. And so those funds would all be spent doing that work. And I should mention also, somebody said, well, how are you going to get somebody to pave just, $77,000 and whatever change was there? And that's the benefit of having, the way we asked the contractor to give us the cost was to give us a unit price for paving, for removing bad soil, and for putting rock in place. So we literally can say, okay, we've got $1,000 left. We'll draw a line and say, okay, do that much more work for $1,000, and that's the end of the project. So we have the flexibility to do whatever we need to complete it, spend the money, and be done.
Okay, so when I add the two figures together, instead of 106,917, it's really 109,039?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
So your plan is to spend 109,039 on the paving completely. So none of this money, $1,000 won't be moved to another project.
No.
Like you
Correct.
said, you'll make sure that you use all of this up in that particular project.
Absolutely.
Correct.
Okay. And if it goes over, you'll find the money from your fund balance or somewhere that you
Yes,
have.
and I assume there'll be some sales tax that comes back from this, and then we'll be able to use that too. And there you go. The type of funding, the type of pricing that we used here will benefit us in that.
Chris, do you have any questions on the paving project? Okay. Steve? Larry? Jason? Okay. Okay, so let's go back to 4.1. I'm sorry for jumping around again.
No, we appreciate it.
4.1, and Lynn Reimer is here, the principal from Central Cabarrus High School. Lynn, do you want to
And Mr.
join us?
Kevin Bryant, may I
Yes.
ask him to come, please?
Then you can bring another chair up, Mr. Whitby.
She can-
I don't know if there's another
she can
chair
come
you
here.
can bring up. It's not attached somewhere.
Right. Stay here.
Yeah, we're used to that. Rich used to have one of those too, not too
Oh,
long
really?
ago, so. That one looks to work better than the one you had.
Thank you, Mr. Kevin Bryant, Central Cabarrus Athletic Director, and Ms. Lynn Reimer, Principal for Central Cabarrus. We appreciate your time. We want to tell you about a project that we're excited about. Mr. Bryant is going to tell you about the details, and I'm just going to give you a summary. And then at the end of the presentation, hopefully between the three of us, we can answer any questions you have about the project and the structure of the funding. What I'd like to tell you today is that we know that we have a lot of funding requests, more recently about $250 million of capital projects that we know that we have needs for, and how do we see this different, and why are we asking you to fund this today? And I'd just like to address some points. One, we see this, we're only asking you to fund 33% of the cost of the project, a third of it. The project cost is $800,000. and we see it different because we have lots of community support. We have secured grants. Cabarrus County Schools has participated in the funding, and so we're asking you today for $265,000, your support, $265,000. And Mr. Bryant is going to talk to you about the return on the investment and the economic sustainability and that type thing. So I'm going to let him go into his presentation, and then we'll talk about the funding or any other questions that you have.
Thank you, Kelly, and thank you for your time. I'm going to try to make it quick. I know the last thing you guys want is to spend another hour on this, so I'm going to try to make it as quick as possible. I think I've spoken to some people about this, and some of you have probably seen the school board presentation that was on this exact issue. We're coming to you today with kind of a unique scenario in that we're presenting a school project that has return on investment, economic impact dollars attached to it, which I think is really unique to this project. Typically, I think a lot of times school projects are, you have to have them for your community, you have to have them to make your schools better, but they don't always have return on investment and economic impact figures directly tied to them. And in this case, this particular project does. And it's unique in its nature because of that. Initially, the turf project at Central Cabarrus was seen as a way to deal with some of the equality issues, some of which have been brought up in the last 5 to 10 minutes at Central Cabarrus, where we do have a lot of needs. It was seen as a way to address those needs. I'm going to talk a little bit about how this project will allow us to focus on some of our other needs that really do exist. It was conveyed to Dr. Shepard that Ms. Reimer and I, myself, would support this as a capital project on Central's campus. Since then, and that started, I believe, last November. I think we're right at a year now of actually working on this. We've had a lot of community support, a lot of community collaboration. We've had a lot of people in this room that have met over this exact issue. We have some folks here from Cabarrus Health Alliance, some folks from the CVB who are here to talk about another project. They have all collaborated on this project. So again, it's much bigger than Central Cabarrus. I don't sit here just as the Central Cabarrus athletic director. I sit here as somebody myself who lives in Cabarrus County, who lives in the city of Concord, and sees this as something that as a taxpayer will have return on investment to where I'm not going to, as you guys said, I'm not going to pay more taxes and not get that revenue back. We've done a lot of research on this. We talked to the Raleigh City Manager extensively, or I myself did, to get their figures. That's really the best case study that we could find in our area that deals with this exact situation where you're looking at doing a joint use between schools and, in our case, FCCA and some other organizations within the community. And what we found is that Raleigh, to be quite honest with you, is making a killing on economic impact dollars. Their hotel revenues have gone through the roof, and I'll share those figures with you in a second. What this project would allow us to do is provide needed field space for local soccer, lacrosse, football, and badminton organizations, and through that it would have an economic impact on Cabarrus County. As far as the benefits of turf, a lot of people are somewhat amazed when they look at these figures and realize that we spend on average about $43,000 a year on our stadium field. That's for boys soccer, girls soccer, and football, and I guess also band competitions. $43,000 a year. When you look at our field marking cost, our irrigation cost, our equipment, our labor, our materials, we spend about between $15,000 and $17,000 on a contract that we do monthly just on labor to be able to spray and fertilize fields, something that I myself or really no idea, I don't believe in this county has a license to do. On top of that, irrigation, for instance, this past summer, we had to put in a new pump. Our irrigation was down for about 2 months where we didn't have irrigation. As a result, we have some real safety hazards on our field that some of you have actually come and looked at, and I think would realize that there's some real issues there in terms of liability on the school system in Cabarrus County in terms of the way that field looks. The yearly cost of synthetic turf is not zero, to be honest with you. It's about $2,000. So there's a $41,000 difference there. When you look at the lifespan of a turf field being about 20 years at the high school level, you can see on a $360,000 project, it doesn't take 20 years to recoup your money. Current natural surface is stressed with 2 to 3 games a week. We're not allowed, or we can't allow band to use it on a regular basis because it just puts too much stress on it. We're not allowed to use outside organizations. It puts too much stress on it. We may be allowed 2 or 3 football clubs a year to be able to use that on a weekend. Otherwise, Saturday, Sunday, weeknights, those fields sit empty. You're looking at a stadium that can hold about 3,000 people sitting empty other than 1 or 2 nights a week, and obviously that's a real shame. That's something that a turf field would address. It would allow that field to be used every night, as long as you want, every weekend, as long as you want, and it wouldn't put stress to the point where that turf would be ruined. It would be, again, about 20 years of use there. No weather cancellations, obviously that's something that when you start looking at FCCA and folks that want to host tournaments, that's a big deal. When they have to cancel a tournament, whether you talk to FCCA or you could talk to some of the baseball and softball organizations, Donnie Brooms collaborated with us on this with Top Gun on the Flow project. He'll tell you it's hard when you bring something in and you have to cancel the tournament because fields are too wet. And the same thing with FCCA. It's very difficult when the fields are too wet, and I think Frank Liss, the project they're doing there will address that a little bit, but this project could also address some of those concerns. Has an extremely high economic impact, and again, those figures will come later as we look at this. I'm going to kind of skip this slide, but basically what we're looking at here is a lot of folks, when we first started looking at this a year ago, said, aren't there still safety concerns that are a part of synthetic turf? And the reality is those concerns no longer exist. And if we go to the next slide, there you have proof of that. 64% of Division I football teams play on synthetic surfaces. 94% of non-BCS schools play on synthetic surfaces. For them, it's not a matter of not having the funding to keep up a natural surface like we struggle with. That tells you right there that synthetic surfaces are much safer in today's climate than a natural surface. And again, if they're much safer at the collegiate level where they're able to spend millions of dollars to keep up their natural surface, you can only imagine at the high school level where right now we have sand all over our field. I know a lot of fields in Cabarrus County have that because we just can't keep them up. Cabarrus County schools, ourselves, we financially cannot keep these surfaces playable anymore to where they're safe for our athletes. Moving on. I have pictures that I'm going to send each of you throughout the week of what our field currently looks like. And I've had the privilege of walking some local politicians around our field, both school board and county commissioners, and everybody says the same thing. It's amazing when you go to Central Cabarrus and look at the facilities we have and how far behind we are. And we're not just talking about our football field, obviously, here, or our soccer field. We're talking about our facilities as a whole. We have to start addressing some of those issues. And I truly believe this is the first step in addressing those issues. Not just with athletics, but with band and with some of these other competitions that we can bring in, with our PE classes, our physical education classes, with our clubs. Last Friday we were supposed to have Celebration Day, which is a great event that brings all our students into the stadium. Well, 2 years ago when I took over, one of the things I had to look at is it feasible for us to still have Celebration Day on our football and soccer field? And it's not. We have to limit that use so much that we really do not get hardly any use out of that stadium field other than Friday nights and a Tuesday or Thursday night soccer game. That's it. And that's really a shame. So I think Ms. Reimer would agree with me that this is something that could benefit our whole community. We have some community members here behind me that came to support this project tonight that have lived in the Central Cabarrus area for a very long time. They're here not because they're just members of our athletic booster club. They're here because they truly believe that this can touch our community as a whole. This can touch Midland. This can touch Central Cabarrus area of Concord. And I truly believe that. I think Ms. Reimer believes that. Estimated lifespan at the high school level of a synthetic surface is about 20 years for the type of surface we're putting in. The lifespan of natural turf is limited. And the same analogy I used at the school board meeting I think applies here. If you have a front yard, you know that in our climate, you probably have to redo your yard every, 5 or 10 years. I had to redo mine last year. I had to put sod down. The reality is natural turf in our climate just doesn't last very long. Whether it be Bermuda that you overseed with rye, whether it be Bermuda that you try to keep dormant in the winter, it's just very difficult to top dress, to resod, to seed, to spray. And when you start looking at all of those costs, it's almost impossible within our budget to maintain a natural surface. And that, again, is why you see so many counties around here. Mecklenburg County now, not saying that we're just going to follow their model and everything, but in this case, they're doing it right. When they build a new school, and some of the schools that exist in Mecklenburg County, they're going back and putting in synthetic surfaces. Mooresville did it. They were one of the first in the area to do it. There's probably 10 to 15 counties, and now Raleigh has jumped on board with that, and Wake County has jumped on board with that, seeing that synthetic surfaces are the wave of the future. Environmental issues. One of the things that the commissioners brought up early in this meeting was, some of the environmental impact that buses have on the county that we live in. And again, as somebody who lives in Concord and Cabarrus County, I'm very aware of that. And the reality is synthetic surfaces are now more environmentally friendly than natural surfaces. The reason for that is very simple. When you start looking at the amount of fertilizer, the amount of spray that we put on a natural surface, it stresses the environment. There's runoff. I'd be lying if I said that you're probably not killing a lot of animals with the runoff that comes off our field when it's being sprayed once or twice a month just to maintain the natural surface. So environmentally, while it sounds crazy, synthetic surfaces are actually better for the environment, and there's studies out there that, again, I can share with you if you would like to see those. Really, the key thing is the ROI attached to this. When we start looking at return on investment, it was amazing to me. At first, I thought, this project was just something that was going to touch the school board because it was just something that Central Cabarrus would like to have or something that made a lot of sense to do. When I started talking to Russell Anlin, who's the city manager up in Raleigh, and started getting figures from him, it was staggering to me the amount of money that they make on a yearly basis from their synthetic surfaces. And you see there a list of economic impact figures from the city of Raleigh. And I understand, we're not the city of Raleigh, but again, in terms of using a case study, I think it's about as close as you can get. $9.4 million a year in economic impact. The majority of that is 5 weekends, starting at the start of November, going through the first week of December, where they have a series of very influential soccer tournaments people come from all over the country for. 10,355 hotel rooms last year were booked as a result of those synthetic surfaces. 36,000 overnight visitors per year. So again, this project kind of goes hand in hand with what the CVB is going to present about the Frank List project. It's not meant to be a substitute for that. It's meant to go along the same lines of ways that we can have economic impact and return on investment within our county to make sure that our tax dollars are being spent wisely. And I think that's, again, really key with this project. It would take a very short period of time for the county to recover the cost of the investment. And I don't know how many school projects we could really say that about, where you're actually recovering cost of a school project with these hotel rooms that are being booked, taxes, et cetera, that are results of this type of project. Conclusion, the installation of synthetic turf fields outweigh the initial cost, both economically and physically. When you start looking at man hours, and again, that was a big question when I presented in front of the school board, is how many man hours are spent on a natural surface? The reality is a ton of man hours. Myself, about 10 to 15 hours a week I spend on our stadium field alone. That doesn't include our baseball field, our soccer field, or our practice field. So I always tell people I'm not just an athletic director. In some sense, I'm kind of a manager of grounds, which I don't think the school board would really say is a wise use of my time when we could be helping student athletes and helping individuals in our school with my time. But the reality is if it doesn't get done by us, we don't have the finances to go out and do it right otherwise. So the joint use project could bring an enormous return on investment to Cabarrus County while also benefiting Central Cabarrus and numerous community groups. All right, again, I cannot minimize how important this is to our community right now. Over the last 6 months, I've had phone call after phone call after phone call, email after email after email saying, you don't understand how much this would revive our community. Let's be honest, Central Cabarrus as a community was dead about 2 or 3 years ago. All right, I think anybody sitting in this room who has ties to Central Cabarrus would agree with that. It went through a period of about 6 or 7 years where it was in very, very rough shape. People were ashamed to be affiliated with the school that I'm very proud to be affiliated with today. And I know a lot of folks in this room either went to that school or have had ties to that school. Ms. Reimer was brought in and has done a tremendous job. And there is momentum within our community. And that momentum really carries a lot of weight as we start looking at this project in terms of what people believe would be best served in doing Central Cabarrus the right way. Entities currently collaborating on this project include the Cabarrus County School System. As Kelly mentioned, they're invested with $65,000. I'm going to the school board meeting as soon as I get out of here. What's that?
Plus 30, 95,000.
Plus 30,000. That 30,000 is a stadium upgrade project that was approved about, I think, 3 months ago, 3 or 4 months ago,
Wow.
something like that. So we're looking at $95,000 that's being put in by the school board right now. What we're asking for is that you help us fund that remaining balance. The most this project would cost is $360,000. There's a good chance that we would come under budget. All right, we would not go over budget, and I feel pretty comfortable saying that. I know that you guys have probably heard that a lot from different members of school entities, but I can assure you that when we start looking at that, and we've already done, W.K. Dixon has done a lot of consulting work. When we look at, again, entities collaborating on this, Cabarrus County Active Living and Parks has been a huge part of this. Our high school FCCA, Cabarrus Health Alliance has actually kicked in, and Aaron Bayer is here tonight. I think $8,500, is that correct? $8,500 has already been spent in consulting fees that Aaron and Cabarrus Health Alliance were able to secure through grants. So that's how we've gotten all of the consulting done up until this point. It's part of a bigger plan for Central Cabarrus and Flow Park. I think it includes 11 multi-purpose fields, soccer and football fields, and then 5 additional baseball fields on some acreage that's currently owned by the county. Conclusion, again, what we're asking for is for your help in this funding. That's really why we're here tonight. I know it's asking a lot. I know we're in very hard economic times. But I truly believe when you start looking at Central Cabarrus that this has the ability to transform our community. And I truly believe if you guys approve this, that you're not approving something that's going to cost taxpayers dollars. You're going to approve something that in the long term is going to have a return on that investment that is going to produce more tax dollars than are initially spent. And, you know, I think the figures speak for themselves. With that said, if there's any questions that the commission has for me, I'd be happy to answer those at this point.
You want to start, Chris?
I just have a few questions for you, and some of these questions Kelly may be able to answer as well. The first one, as you mentioned, the stadium. Yeah, I'm a graduate from Central Cabarrus, so I understand. And the stadium is in bad repair, so there's $30,000 that's going to be put forth to upfit. And what will that include? Is that the concrete bleachers? Or? So
we were doing an allocation of fund balance last fiscal year, 12-13, and
right.
We asked the athletic directors for a list of what they would spend some funding on if it were allocated to their athletic programs. And Central Cabarrus had a long list of what they would spend those funds on. And so our board ended up allocating $30,000 to a couple of different schools. And this is what they decided that they would want to put those funds to.
So it'll go directly to the field, not stadium upfit. So
assuming that we can get this project funding, that's where they would want those dollars to go to.
Into the field.
Into the field.
Okay. So not.
If I could speak to that, one of the things that we've talked about with the school board and as we've had these meetings is the amount of money that we would be able to fundraise as a result of this synthetic surface. When you start looking at the amount of people that it would bring in, the sponsorship opportunities, I think over time, I truly believe that we would be able to fundraise somewhere between $50,000 and $60,000 a year when you start looking at sponsoring the field, sponsoring scoreboards, sponsoring entranceways. We already do a lot of that, but when I can go to business people, whether they be in the area or this would obviously open doors across the state and throughout the country with national sponsors and say, hey, there's going to be 800,000 people a year that go through these gates. I think I would be able to raise, that $30,000 that we put into the turf field, we would get that back. I truly believe in about 6 months with sponsorship money.
Okay, well, and that's what I would like to ask about. You mentioned the economic impact. Now, how will this work, this being on a school property? Are you going to have tournaments there? How is this going to bring revenue other than just the school, Central Cabarrus, using it itself? Just curious of how that, who else is going to be using the fields or
Sure.
the field, not the fields?
And there's a couple, FCCA we're looking at doing a partnership with,
Okay.
where FCCA would be able to use it. Saturday and Sunday, we obviously don't use the field at all right now. If it was a synthetic surface, we still wouldn't use it at all on Saturday and Sunday, which is when the majority of their tournaments are played. Lacrosse in the area is obviously becoming very big. Lacrosse is almost impossible to play on a natural surface because it destroys certain areas that are called the box. So
Right, I understand.
this would allow those lacrosse organizations, and as a result, the funding that comes in from that in terms of, again, sponsorship would be the big thing at Cabarrus County that we would be able to grab onto and have some. We're also looking at revising, I think the school board is looking at revising some of the stuff with regards to being able to do naming rights on, might be fields, might be stadium, doing some of those things. And then also looking at revising the current agreement we have with second use and allowing some of those organizations to have more decision-making power in using that surface.
Okay. Okay, so you'll be in charge of, it would be you who would be the point person to decide who gets to use the fields, or, if they're going to be rented out?
We have a board policy of community use facility.
Okay. Well, I know this is different, so.
It
'cause
is a
this
little different. So we have the first use is the school's use, the second use is the county, Parks and Rec, or active living, and so the third use would be, goes with our board facility use, community use policy. If we wanted to do anything beyond a year agreement, we could certainly go into a lease agreement with that. But otherwise, the users would work with the school to use it.
And so the school would receive the funds that, who would receive the funds?
There's a fee structure.
Okay.
So the facility use fee structure is set up so that we need to recover the lights and for any type of custodial use that we have. If we need a staff on site, we need to recover those types of fees. But any other types of fees that the school, we built in something for custodial type tissue paper, paper towels, things like that, that the school is responsible for making sure that there's there. So they're able to use, charge a fee for that. So those types of things will go back to the school. So yes, the school will get some, and we make sure that we recover our cost at the site level.
Okay. And then currently, the approximately $43,000 that's spent on the natural turf fields, who pays for that? Is that the school system?
Most of that comes from the school level, gate tickets and that type thing. So they generate their own dollars and they pay for their own maintenance. So then that
So where
would
will
be-
that savings go? Could it be for outfitting the stadium, whatever you, okay.
Yes, sir. That would, that's exactly what we would propose in this situation, is allowing us to save that money would then allow us to fix the bathrooms, fix the fencing issues, which are very real at our stadium. Some of those things that we said we needed with that $30,000. And to be honest, that $30,000 is not going to touch what we need to do.
Right. I understand.
If you've been on
But
our
it
facility.
helps you.
Absolutely. So.
Okay. All right. One reservation I do have is that, there's been discussion about replacing Central Cabarrus, which I don't foresee really happening. But, if you've got 20 years on this field and for some reason Central Cabarrus is replaced before that, what would happen?
We have had that discussion. We could build around that field,
Okay.
certainly.
All right. Answers all my questions. Thank you.
Steve?
That answered most of my questions. I was mainly curious about the availability of the field for other uses. I'm certainly in favor of opening up the schools for the entire community to benefit from as much as possible. The hotel, motel, room nights are important to us. Certainly going to be important to the next topic we're going to be talking about. If that coordinates, and I know that's can be challenging sometimes. I'd love to hear what Mr. Applegate and the folks from CVB think about that. But I think you've done a good job of explaining it. At $41,000 a year, I mean, you're looking at $800,000 in maintenance over a 20-year period. That makes a lot of sense, and the environmental piece of it is something that I hear more about every day, even from a residential standpoint. So thank you for a good job in presenting all those facts.
Thank you.
Larry?
Sounds to me like it'll pay for itself, so I don't see no reason not to do it.
Jason?
I have actually a question a little bit apart from the project, but related. When I went to the school board meeting where Mr. Bryant made his presentation there, he made a great presentation there also. We had talked about this, or the school board had talked about this being a refund amount of $132,711.74. It was item 5.2 on the Board of Education agenda, and that said, In fiscal year 2012-13, $132,711.74 was received from Chicago Title Insurance. The funds come from the road construction escrow. Funds should be used for items that are capital in nature. And the check that we got back is $67,711.74. So I was curious about the difference in a month.
Sure. So part of those funds came from county dollars, and the other 65,000 came from Portrait Homes. So since those funds didn't generate from the county, so we returned the county funds to the county plus interest. We didn't split the interest with you. We gave you all the interest, and so we took we have the 65,000 in our possession that came from Portrait Homes, and that's the 65,000 that we plan to invest in this project. Our board is fully supportive of this project, and we're going to put those funds. So the amount of the funds, the 132,000 that we talked about back then, we still plan to invest in this project. It's just we're actually asking you for 265,000 versus the original amount.
Okay. And I would say doing repairs to Central Cabarrus is very high up on my priority list. I had a meeting this week, can't go too much into it, with Dr. Shepard, where we talked about that. And I'm trying to come up with some funds to really make some repairs. I have concerns about this project. One of the concerns that I have is it looks like that it's about $40,000 a year in savings. Not all of that is cash savings. Some of that is in-kind savings. So that does not give us cash to store away. We are creating a capital expenditure for ourselves 20 years from now that is $800,000, right?
In terms of when you have to replace a turf field?
Yeah, a turf field is about $800,000.
It's somewhat speculative because the cost of turf has gone down considerably from when it first introduced itself about 15 to 20 years ago. Kind of like flat screen TVs or electronics, turf has done the same thing. So, while we look at it right now and the typical cost about $800,000, and we've got this grant for $360,000. Yeah, if we didn't achieve a grant and if turf maintained the same cost, then yes. My opinion would be that it would be lower than that. It may be the same because you look at cost of living and the dollar not meaning as much as it used to and all those things. But the reality is that the turf has gone down in price every year for about the last 15 years, and I would expect that would continue again, much like an electronic item that comes out for the first time. You keep having more and more, and eventually it goes down in cost. So.
And I totally understand that point. I think if you look at artificial turf over the last 50 years, you'd find it's more expensive today than it was 30 years ago, for instance, because it's a completely different product. And one thing that concerns, it used to be AstroTurf, right? I mean, you'd find the carpet that was basically laid out on concrete, and this is a completely different product.
Correct.
But products change, and as they change, the new technology comes out, and many times the new technology is much more expensive than the old technology because it's much better. So I do have concerns that we would be creating an $800,000 capital liability for ourselves in the future, and that other schools would want a synthetic field also, and that it would create an $800,000 liability, whether they get there through grant originally or not. Sure. Eventually, we're going to have to start replacing these things, and so that does give me concern. I just want to let you know that.
Okay. And if I could just speak very briefly, in this sense, we've asked for this knowing that we have a lot of other needs, and I think it's very important to be upfront about that. We do have other needs. Our position is that we would be able to fix those needs based on money that we raise that directly relates to this synthetic surface. So
Some of those needs.
the athletic needs. Not the entire school, but the athletic needs. Whereas, for instance, your discussion about the weight room and some of those things. Last year we raised through private donations. We had about 16,000 in private donations. Secured about 15,000 was donated by the Houston Texans and their owner. That's how we redid our weight room. It was all privately funded, 100%. And now we have some real issues there because of the leaking roof and some damage that was done and some of those things. So if this synthetic surface is put in, the sponsorship revenue that we would be able to achieve and some of the field use revenue we would be able to achieve would allow us to fix the weight room, fix the bleachers, fix the bathrooms, all of those things that really need fixing. So,
do you see yourselves being able to achieve those revenue sources with the condition of your stadium in the hole that it's in right now? Because I do remember, actually, several members of Central Cabarrus came and spoke and talked about the fact that your driveway and your parking lot is not paved and it's not ADA accessible, and I've seen the condition of your bathrooms. They're deplorable and things like that. Is it really practical to think that in the shape that your stadium's in right now, that you could achieve some revenue off of that in order to come back and fix some of those things?
It is, and the reason I say that is every weekend for about the last 3 months, I've had people request to use our field. Football organizations, soccer organizations, in the shape that it's in, I just can't allow them to because it does so much damage to our natural surface. So I know if those folks want to use our field in the current nature that it is, whether it be in a year when there's just synthetic surface and we're working on the bathrooms, or in 2 years when we fundraise to fix the bathrooms, I have no doubt that we will have as many people lined up to use that field as we can possibly fit on that field. Let me also say, last year, our athletic gates were $89,000. Our athletic department spent over $140,000. Our booster club, largely through private sponsors and private donors, business people in the community, et cetera, was able to raise about $70,000, I think it was, in the current state of our athletic facilities. Now, a lot of that was momentum of some new people being in some new places. A lot of that is, I think I've got the best booster club in the county, if I can brag on them a little bit. But the reality is that we've, I think, proven that we can raise money in our current state, which is, again, in my opinion, we've got the worst athletic facilities in the county. I really believe that. And we've still proven we're able to raise money. I believe there's no doubt that we can go way beyond that number if we have better facilities, and this would provide that. So, thank you.
Where did the $440,000 grant come from?
That was secured through Mike Applegate, who's over here, who's going to speak about the Frank List project. He helped us with that, and the CVB has been involved in every meeting that we've had. And again, I can't thank them enough. I know they're about to come in front of you and ask for the Frank List project. This is not meant to compete with the Frank List project. That's the last thing I want to do, and I want to make that very clear, because without the Cabarrus Visitors Bureau help, and all of the influence and the ability that they've had to help our school and our community and this particular project, we would not be here right now. This project would be absolutely dead on arrival.
Okay, then I will ask the CVB about the grant money when they come forward.
Yeah.
So I'll go ahead and plan on that. Because the question is, if you can get $440,000, I agree with exactly what you said, because I've already heard it from a couple different high schools. Why don't we get a turf field? So if there's grant money available for one, is there grant money available for others? Secondly, this is more for Kelly. Why do you not have to return the money to Portrait Homes?
They held it in an escrow, and once that was completed, they returned it. So that money was held for.
I understand, but Portrait Homes gave the school system the money for what purpose?
It was a road.
Was it okay, let me back up. For example, recently, I believe, at Patriots Elementary School, there was a need for a sewer line that came over school property, and there was a small amount of money, a few $1,000s, if I remember correctly, that was used for that access that will be used at Patriots Elementary School.
Yes.
So $65,000 was given, for some reason, to Cabarrus County Schools for a project. If it wasn't used for that project, why doesn't it go back? If you had to give the money back to us, why doesn't it go back to Portrait Homes? Want to make sure that you don't have a boomerang effect where they're going to come back and say, we deserve to get that money back, and now you've committed it. And
No, we
You see what I'm
cleared
saying?
it with our lawyer, and we cleared it with Portrait Homes. I know we don't have to give the money back, but why, I can't recall at this very moment, but I do know that we did check with everyone to make sure that there was no repercussion on that we did not have to give the money back, for sure.
Okay. If you could just kind of get that to the county manager, just,
I will.
because I think that's important,
Okay.
based on things going on, to make sure that you don't get, have a problem after you've spent the money. So you're going to add to your duties to schedule the field for Fridays and Saturdays?
Absolutely. I'm going to take all the time that I used to spend
You going to be there on Fridays and Saturdays to make sure it's being used right?
Sure. Right now, I'm there mowing the lawn anyway, so,
Yeah,
but
you
no.
won't be
tip-
there. I mean, I'm
What-
saying that is a unique thing, and somebody has to be responsible. What I hear from Parks and Rec is it's a lot of time to reserve sites and make plans and everything else.
Yeah, and currently, with the facility use agreement, typically we have somebody on site that whoever the outside organization is would pay for one person, one supervisor, one administrator to be there. Sometimes that's myself, sometimes that's our assistant athletic director, sometimes it's an administrator, so it just kind of depends on the situation.
And there obviously, which you did address, there'll be additional utility costs, because if you're having the fields at night and on weekends, or at night, then you're gonna have more utility costs. So that's part of the fee that you're gonna charge.
Yeah, yes, ma'am.
It's built
I
in,
think.
it's built in the structure, the facility use structure.
I mean, I appreciate the information on Raleigh. I don't think that has anything to do with what's going on here. You've got one turf field. They have 3 turf fields and 18 natural fields. I don't think the economic impact's going to be anything like Raleigh, depending on who's actually going to be using the field. So I think it's a good idea to open up fields up to other entities, but I don't think the return on investment's going to be as much as what you think it's going to be. I hope that you get enough from it to cover your cost. But I really don't. I would be, other than not having to do the maintenance normally, I'd be real surprised if you make a whole lot of money off of it. Some of the entities that you mentioned don't pay 100% of the fees, I think, that the school already has in place, or at least through Parks and Rec they don't, and they get things fairly cheaply. So I'm sure the school board will manage that correctly and make sure that you do make some money off of it, at least cover all the costs that you're going to have if you're using it 7 days a week. For the commissioner's perspective, I did ask about, when we first got the agenda item, it had just that check amount. Personally, I think those are 2 separate items. One was the fact that there were monies in escrow that needed to come back to the county. But the most important thing is that their true ask of us was $265,000, and it was not reflected in at least what I read last week when we got the agenda. So that would be the change. You do have in front of you, I think you gave this to everybody, right? A handout which identifies that the ask for this project is $265,000, because I wanted to make sure that if we go forward with it, that we have complete understanding of the total investment from the county. I would presume that other schools, that if this goes forward, that we will hear from other high schools in the county. They're going to go to the CVB and ask for grant money, and they're going to come to us and ask for one-time funds to meet this. So one of the things on this item, if we go forward with it, we do need to identify where the $265,000 would come from. So, Ms. Dubois, what are our options for funding sources? Because you would need a budget amendment to do that.
You do have the 67,000 or that was returned to us. It's been posted to a revenue account. That's available. Your contingency is available and fund balance is available.
Okay, so we would need to, the 67,000, the money that came back to us is sitting where?
The revenue in the debt service fund, because that money was obligated,
Okay,
From
so
a bond
technically
fund.
that's gone towards debt service. That had to go towards debt service, right?
but it has no budget associated with it.
Okay. So do we have to do, I'm just trying to think procedurally, we would need to do a motion to identify where that money goes to, separate?
Or it
But-
could be just cleaner just to use contingency or fund balance.
Okay, that's what I mean. We would do a motion for 265,000, because they are 2 separate items.
Correct, because
Okay.
the 67,000 that's coming back has to go towards debt service.
Right.
What we budgeted money for debt service this year, which you could say, you could take 67,000 from that, so it's all in accounting. It's got to be just tracked in the proper manner, or you can just go 265 from, like you said, fund balance or your contingency. So the money that's coming back from the schools is not going to this project. It has to go to debt service. However, we budgeted money, including $67,000, to go to debt service. So you could put that 67 in, pull 67 out, or you can do it with just fund balance or contingency.
So we would need to consider that. I think the cleanest way, as I understand right now, would be a motion for the 265,000, and we would say where it comes from.
Do we?
Not tonight, we would do that in 2 weeks, but just
Do we
wanna
have
make sure
the
that's-
option to use the athletic funds that are set aside from the 5% of our hotel occupancy tax?
I would have to go back and ask the board, but typically it's for our parks.
Okay,
That's what the agreement is.
okay. Wasn't some of that money used for restrooms at Rocky River Elementary?
That is one of our parks.
It is, okay.
It's a school park.
I'm pretty sure the agreement says school parks.
School
I think there's some provision of it in
That's
there
right, parks
with
and
respect to
school parks.
schools. Yeah.
Parks and school parks. That's a stretch. But I'm not saying it couldn't be done, but,
Right.
I mean, our school parks are Rocky River, Cox Mill, Bethel and Harrisburg Elementary.
Okay,
And those were specifically extra property that we built to build the park on, so.
okay.
Or that we purchased.
And
Yeah,
this,
we typically don't have, high schools typically are not a park because they use them so much for high school activities that we've had trouble getting anybody else on there. Yes, sir.
and where were we discussing the funds coming from for the planetarium project at Central? Just out of our one-time,
Yeah, that was one-time funds that we would appropriate if we chose to do the project.
That would have been
Which-
fund balance.
Yeah,
Right.
fund balance, which is where this could come from, too.
which is approximately the same dollars, if I remember correctly.
I think this is less. That project kept escalating,
I think
so
it had gotten up to 350,000 last
it was,
report.
but you're right, it's come from the same
Right.
general pot, so. Okay, yes, sir.
The agreement says that we can use it to pay for improvements to county and local school parks, recreation, recreation and athletic facilities, including the county's arena, that can be utilized for events by conventions and/or visitors. So I think potentially this would fit into that category.
We would still need to go back to the CVB board to get that approval.
If I could
Okay.
just mention from a tourism standpoint, I think that the CVB and their project in Frank Lisk would do a lot for our field in terms of, then you would have three fields that are very close to each other. And again, I'll let the CVB kind of speak to that, but I think that it would make our field, obviously, the economic impact would be much greater if the Frank Lisk project was there also now. And whether both of those can happen is obviously, another thing, but I do want to make that statement.
Okay, are there any other questions about the field, this field project? Okay. Would one of you come up and grab the microphone there on the end, if you will?
Wow. Bringing chairs.
Madam Chairwoman, do you think we could send Ms. Klutz over to her meeting? I hate to make you late.
Thank you.
I mean, I don't disagree with you. I don't know if she needs to stay for it. That's your decision. If you need to go, you can surely go. Go ahead, Michael.
I'm torn.
You don't want to pull away from all this.
Yeah,
There's a show coming.
thank you. Guys handle it.
So the question was, we're curious of where the grant came from. Through the Convention and Visitors Bureau and some contacts that I have in the sports industry, we applied for a purchasing discount with Global Soccer Ministries, who works closely with a manufacturer called Polytex Manufacturing. They have a manufacturing plant of synthetic turf in Calhoun, Georgia. And each year, Global Soccer Ministries, working in their, with their community organization, identifies various projects that they will give a purchasing discounts to, for acquiring synthetic turf fields for the quote that we received from them was $362,000. So we reached out to them, were granted a preliminary approval letter for the funding of a turf field for $362,000 per field. Now, market value for that field typically is $900,000, $850,000. But through this program, and through our standing as a nonprofit, we were able to receive one of these grant awards to basically buy down, receive this turf field at 40% of the true market value.
And so
Okay,
this
well-
is just for the Central Cabarrus project, not for the Franklin. You're not getting the grant for the Franklin.
No, we have plenty of grants to go around for all synthetic turf fields that we're discussing tonight.
Okay.
We've reached out, in 2013, we've secured two grants. There are more grants available to us to secure in 2014.
For the Franklin Park.
I'm not sure what order these will be used in or not. Right now, there's plenty of grant money to do multiple projects. Right now, we have two in place.
Okay.
That two is soon to be additional.
So is it 362,000 or 440,000?
362,000. We
yeah.
basically, the fixed cost in it would be $262,000 was the quote that they made for running the synthetic turf at the mill. And then there'd be about another 100,000 or so more variable costs involved in securing a contractor to do the prep work in order to do the appropriate install of the synthetic turf.
And that was coming from who?
I'm sorry?
What company is that coming from?
It is coming from a nonprofit, an alliance, and funding partners with Global Soccer Ministries, and Polytex is the manufacturer of the synthetic turf. Those two organizations work in close relationship to provide a number of opportunities per year to promote youth sports and athletics to nonprofit organizations around the country.
Where do they get their money from?
Actually, it's the mill will go ahead and just do a run
Okay.
of the product for a reduced price for opportunities that they've identified through their grant process.
Okay.
And we've made application, wrote them a letter about the nature of the work that we do at the CVB and how that would be beneficial to us as we improve facilities in the county.
So that would still go back to, based on the numbers that we got earlier, if it's 362 instead of 440, that's a $78,000 difference. So we would need to know, and now I'm sorry that Kelly left, but if we can relay that, we need to find out I guess this is one of my bugaboos, okay? Is the field $800,000 or is the field some other? We get round numbers, and I'm not criticizing you for round numbers at this point. I'm just saying that projects we get requests on have nice round numbers, and I've never bought anything. No, knock on wood. Every once in a while, I go get whatever at a convenience store, and it ends up being a nice round number, and the cashier will say, "Whoa, I can't believe that happened." That, you know, it's not going to be a nice round number. So I want to make sure that this is the complete ask, and that it does get the project done for the right amount of money. And if there is $78,000 or $50,000 that it comes up short, that Cabarrus County Schools is planning on funding those. So, and I think that you would want to know that too, because you can't go forward with it if you end up $50,000 short. So,
And I think there's some confusion maybe, and I wish Kelly was here on this number. The 440 is what the county is saving. The actual cost of the project, which is on the PowerPoint, if you add all those numbers together, that's the actual cost of the project, which is approximately $360,000. So that, I'm assuming is it this sheet here that you're looking at, Ms. Poole?
this was sent to us by the county, by the school system.
Correct, so
And this is all we have to go with. So before I can vote on it, I want the actual numbers, and I want to know that it's covered.
The
Okay.
440,000 is the 60% discount off of the turf. And that's not what they called it on that piece of paper.
So
It's called grant funds, $440,000. This is
It's
what,
the reduction in the price from the manufacturer of the
I just would
turf.
like to have the actual numbers from the school system to make sure that going forward with a project of this nature, you don't come up short.
We'll get Kelly to
Because-
redo that for you tomorrow.
Right, because the last thing you want at Central Cabarrus is to find out you have to come up with $50,000 that you weren't expecting, and now all of a sudden, and frankly, the last thing that I want is next month for you to come up and say, well, we didn't have the numbers right, and now we need another $50,000. That's what drives me insane, or not insane, but is annoying when you keep adding on to. I just want to know what something costs and where the money's coming from. It balances nice and neat, and all's good and well. So that's, go ahead.
And to your point, Chairman Poole, when I had gone out for my site visit, you had talked about one of the great things about this field was going to be the remediation of a safety issue on your visitor side, which is a giant hill that you felt like created a safety issue and certainly created an irrigation issue. And one of the things that you had mentioned to me was that you were going to build this field up about 4 feet and really incline it, which would push the beginning, if you raise it 4 feet, it pushed the beginning of the incline of that hill back, I think you said about 3 yards, 12 feet. Now, when I look through the CVB proposal, they don't have 4 foot of site work additions on their proposal, and their field is still $900,000. So I'm curious how you could do this field with the buildup of the turf to a 4 foot level to remediate that problem in the back for what they're spending to just install the field.
And I think there's 2 parts to that. Number one is the surface itself coming up, and I wish Tim Louder was here because he could speak to that. He's done all the work as far as the architect work at this point, and the planning and development and all of those things, and that's where the grant from the Health Alliance came in with the prep work. Myself not being an expert on that, I couldn't really speak to how they do that. The second part of that is, if you look at our stadium currently, both our football and soccer field, so if this is our stadium with bleachers here and bleachers here, the field itself is offset, whereas if you're looking from the field house, it's offset to the left side, meaning you have about, I'd say, 5 yards of space between the visitor sideline and the fence. On the home sideline, you probably have 10 to 15 yards of space. Reason for that is there's a couple reasons. One is when there's 3 drainage systems currently, which don't function properly, but 3 rubber covered drainage systems. They put those too far out on the surface, which then forces us to move our field over to the side so that we're not playing on a rubber drainage surface. So our field actually doesn't even sit center to our stadium. It sits offset to the left. By redoing the field, putting in a synthetic surface, obviously it would redo the drainage itself and allow us to put the field back in the middle, which would create more space from that fence itself. That current embankment is approximately 4 feet. The field being built up would address a lot of that, and then obviously the space, the distance between the sideline and the hill itself, the fence itself is obviously going to help that tremendously too. If you haven't been to our field, you probably know what we're speaking about. Currently, if you go off the visitor sideline, there's very little space. You run into a hill and then run into a fence. So
That really seems like it's going to be a tremendous project, and I have concerns that those costs are not included in this, and that the situation that Chairman Poole described in terms of we allocate the funds for this field and then it turns out to be a much more expensive project. I do have those concerns, so I would like to get those addressed before we vote on this.
Okay.
Thank you.
Another thing I'd like to offer too, and I'm not sure if this would help in your decision making, is our current Booster Club funds. I can tell you that we could take a vote next week that any additional costs, the Booster Club would cover those, and I could try to get my Booster Club to approve that and use the fund balance that they have if there was an additional cost to this project, to make sure that, again, the taxpayers and you guys I'm not having to come back here and ask for additional money, that would be covered, and that would give us basically a fund balance to ensure that any additional cost over that 360 we would cover on our end. I'd be happy to do that, and we have our Booster Club meeting next Monday. We could vote on that.
I'll just add to that, I appreciate that. The only problem I see with that is it could be a remaining $100,000, $200,000. I'm sure the Booster Club wouldn't be able to afford. So I would like to see some more of those numbers before next week. And if that is included, I would imagine that's not included in these numbers, the 4 feet increase. But, I would like to see that by next week or by the next meeting.
You don't have any cost on that to raise that field up 4 feet?
It's my understanding, and again, speaking with the architects and the folks that are a lot more of an expert than myself, that it would still come in under the $360,000. It's their belief that the project itself, that $360,000 would probably be somewhat high when you look at The grading cost, I think, is $100,000 for the prep work, is essentially what we're
Well,
responsible
also
for.
the crushed stone base that needs to be there for the synthetic field, they price that out at about $1.30 per square foot. I think it's somewhere around 80,000
Correct.
square feet.
Yeah, so, it's my understanding based on the opinions that I've been given on that.
Can we get a cost on that before we vote on this?
Yes, sir.
Do you know, again, not really in your realm, but you might know this, has the school board voted to go forward with the project?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, they are speaking tonight again about the project. They are in favor of the project. They have given written, both to you guys as well as us. They were going to speak again about it tonight, and that's where Kelly was going. But
Okay.
as of
So-
this afternoon with Dr. Shepherd, yes, that is, they are going.
Okay,
for
they
that.
will meet next week, we will meet the next week. So when you talk to them, I think it would be helpful, I don't know what motion they will make next week, but it would be helpful if in the motion that they include that, any cost, that they will bear, they or the boosters will bear any cost overruns or, whatever it is, so that, I don't know exactly how to word that, but I'd like for them to know that in the event it goes higher, that they're going to have to come up with the additional funds. I mean, I think that if the project's done, I want the project to be done and done right. And if 265 is what the county puts into it, so that it can be used on weekends, you can host all kinds of events, drive everybody crazy out there on 49. I think that's a great thing. CVB gets, use the fields, Parks and Rec, whoever it is. I think it's a great thing to use the fields as much as possible. So just want to make sure that you don't get in the middle of tearing up your field and find out, to use your number, $100,000 short, and that's not a little number for anybody, and based on everything going on. And I know that you want that too, so maybe if we ask for it, we can help make sure you get that assurance from them too. So for the CVB, I would say that you probably will get phone calls from other athletic directors at the county, at the high schools, because I would think that once this one gets it put in place, presuming the vote goes that way, once it gets put in place, I can see that the other high schools are going to say the same thing. They're all spending the same amount of money that you're talking about for maintaining fields. They all have, a lot of use on the field. I don't know did y'all play at home Friday night?
This past Friday, we were away.
Okay. The ones that played at home Friday night, it rained like crazy all Friday afternoon. Everybody was wondering, are you playing or not playing? And fields were a muddy mess. So I'm just saying, I think that if that one goes in and it goes in well, you're going to get requests from the other high schools, which means, Commissioners, we will get requests from other high schools for $265,000. And fair's fair, so.
I would just like to speak to that. I was at Northwest for a while, and I really appreciate what you guys have done to try to help them in their facility. I think as a principal in this district for a while, we all realize the schools that are in need. And I don't think there's a principal or a school in this district that don't believe the same thing that we do, and that is that Central is in need. I don't think any of the athletic directors at this point are jealous or are upset that we would be getting this, I can tell you that. And we've had this conversation in our own arenas to discuss. I'm thrilled that Northwest has a new fancy gym. I'm thrilled that Concord is getting the things that they've gotten, and the cafeteria. You walk in that school, it looks fantastic right now. So I think we all have our own things that we get to say, hey, this is for Central. And so to speak to that, and 10 years from now, I would say to you, every high school that you build this going forward needs to have the synthetic field. Don't do it without it. The money's there, do it. 10 years from now, every high school should have it in the state of North Carolina, period, in my opinion. I think that's what you're going to see. If you look at all the new high schools being built, that's what's happening. So just to speak to that, I think we don't begrudge any of us. We're all excited when other schools get things. Doesn't mean we don't want them as well, but certainly don't begrudge anybody else what they've got. But this would be a fantastic opportunity for our community, as well as working with the Parks and Rec. We're really excited about that, and CVB, and hopefully some of these other projects pulling that community back and putting it out in the forefront. We're really excited about that. So thank you.
Any other comments about the field? Thank you all very much.
Thank you for your time.
We're going to go back to 3.2. Shannon, about how long do you think you guys, okay, let's do that first. Let's do 3.2. the Council for a Sustainable Local Economy, and then after that, let's take a brief break, okay? Welcome. Thank you very much for being patient with us to try to work through these other issues.
Thank you. I'm Shannon Johnson for Commissioner Ostrick that I haven't met yet. And I am the facilitator for the Council for Sustainable Local Economy along with other duties here in the county. And I'd like to introduce Jerry Weichel, who is our chairperson and is going to give an update on some successes that the council has accomplished this year. You have a memo and he's going to highlight some of that information.
Good afternoon, Commissioners, and thank you for allowing me a few minutes to update you on progress made by a group of volunteers that serve on the Council for a Sustainable Local Economy, or CSLE. These volunteers are passionate about making the county more local business friendly and hopefully are making it easier for businesses of all sizes to operate here. These volunteers have been working on regulatory reform, education, and on making a community impact without cost. You last heard from the council in January when one of our members, Josh Knipp, talked about a listening tour we conducted in 2012 for small business owners. We wanted to hear about difficulties they were experiencing doing business in the county. During the listening tour, several obstacles to starting or expanding businesses were identified. Josh presented 3 recommendations that the council wanted to work on to address some of these obstacles. Besides these recommendations, the council also adopted several other goals for 2013. We wanted to look for common sense ways to help remove some complexities of government and make it easier for businesses to locate or expand in the county. We wanted to help locally owned businesses by educating parts of the community on the benefits to the community by shopping local. We wanted to expand opportunities for locally owned businesses to bid on local government RFPs. We met with a local, for example, we met with a local commercial real estate broker early this year. One obstacle identified during that meeting for small businesses were the cost of landscaping and a requirement that all landscaping be completed before a business could get a certificate to occupy the building and open up its doors. This could be quite a cash flow obstacle for a small company. A simple wording change to allow more flexibility is close to being put in the rule books. After a review of the county website by some of our council members, some simple changes to make it easier for future or current businesses to get information and find resources have been made to the business section of the county website. After a meeting with purchasing departments from this county and other local towns and cities, we realized that it is extremely confusing for local businesses to find out when there are chances to sell their goods or services to local governments in the area. We are currently working on a county-wide outreach series of seminars to help locally owned businesses that would like to sell to local governments. Think Cabarrus First is an education and local business membership organization started by this council. It was successfully spun off from the government in July. Please remember these businesses when you make a choice of where to spend your money. As a council, we have read numerous studies performed across the country that demonstrate the financial benefits to a local community when people spend money at a locally owned business compared to chains. These studies indicate that about 25 cents more for every dollar spent stays in the community. For example, every $1 million that's spent generates an extra $250,000 that stays in the community instead of disappearing. This is great for local economic development and a stronger local economy. We are working to complete several other projects underway, and we recently had a planning retreat and have identified several other areas to focus on next year. There should be a copy of our retreat report in your package. We have made progress so far, and we have more to do. We thank you for the chance to serve you, Cabarrus small businesses, and the rest of the county. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Commissioners, do you have any questions?
I don't have any questions. Just, comment. Thank you guys, and thank your council for what you're doing as a small business owner. I appreciate it, so thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank
You're
you.
true to your word. Let's take a 5-10 minute break. If that works for everybody, get some more coffee, and then we'll start back.